Hello, I'm Russell Sturgis. I'm the founder and principal of the Centre for Western Mindfulness. Welcome to the last in the series of blogs that I've been doing in 2022 on forgiveness. And this month I'm looking at the concept of how to ask for forgiveness. Ultimately, asking for forgiveness is having the ability to recognise or be aware of the fact that you've done something that has hurt somebody else, and you're aware that your behaviours have been responsible for creating a situation that made it possible for somebody else to be hurt. In the blog, in the written blog, I make reference to 8 different things that you could do in order to enhance the quality of how you ask forgiveness with somebody that you may have done something that led to them being hurt. And I want to just talk about those 8 things in a little bit more detail. And this is really about genuinely, as I talk about in the notes, asking for forgiveness. So number 1 is making eye contact with the person with whom you're seeking forgiveness. Now, eye contact is, the eyes are essentially the windows of the soul. And so in the majority of cases, and sometimes people can be deceiving in how they use their eyes, but in the majority of cases, when we're able to look into somebody's eyes, we get the depth and the quality around the things that they're talking about. And in this particular case, when somebody's expressing that they're sorry for something that they've done, being able to hold the gaze of the person that you're asking forgiveness of and to be able to look them in the eyes is a very strong indication that what you're saying is true, is real, is something that you are serious about. And so that builds confidence in the person with whom you're speaking. The second suggestion that I make is that you avoid making excuses. It's interesting, an excuse essentially seeks for freedom from responsibility. Now, that's very different to explaining a rationale or a reason, because what that does is that it helps to give somebody else understanding when you're able to give rationale or reason for why you did what you did. And that isn't about presenting an excuse in order to be excused, but it's about helping to enhance the understanding. And what we know is that when people have understanding or greater awareness, it means that they have a greater capacity to function in a more loving and forgiving way in this sort of situation. So giving a rationale or reason is very different to giving an excuse, and because what we're not wanting to do is to give an excuse. The third one that I talk about is don't be defensive. Now, this is got some other elements to it that I want to discuss, and once again, these other elements aren't about aspects of defensiveness, but it is about clear boundaries, and there is a place for boundaries here. And this is the whole notion of remembering whose business is whose. So what I'm saying there is that in a situation where you've done something that's resulted in somebody experiencing hurt, your actions and what you did, you're responsible for. There's a series of facts, and there's no justification in order to defend any of the behaviours that you've done. That being said, how the person responds to that is their responsibility. In other words, you're not responsible for their response. You're responsible for what you did, and you can't defend that in the sense that you can't justify it. But in terms of how somebody else reacts or responds to what you did, that's their choice. Now, if this was somebody that is highly aware and enlightened and has peace as their priority, then they will choose to act in a loving way to what's gone on, as opposed to somebody who lives with a framework of victimhood. They're going to embellish their state of victimhood and really sort of play that out, because that's maybe all they know. Where they go with that is up to them. You're not responsible for that, but you are responsible for what it is that you've said or done. And in this situation, you won't defend it. You'll be able to state the facts and clearly be able to identify what you were responsible for in your behaviour. And to be honest, this is a place of having honesty and integrity in explaining what it is that you did or what you've done. It's about being able to speak the truth of the situation, but holding the awareness that how they've responded to that or how they're responding to it, they're responsible for that. Okay, the next one was about developing the art of reflective listening. And reflective listening is something that sort of emerged probably during the late 60s, early 70s, could have been earlier than that, but it's this whole idea that there's an approach to communication where you have the ability to really connect and be totally present to the dialogue and of course in this situation in a place where there's admission of fault, where there's a wanting to have metanoia, which is to have a new way of thinking in terms of how you relate to somebody else and how you turn up in the relationship. So I'm just going to share what's called the Fisher's model, and I'm going to sort of read some notes here just to share with you. And these were Delmar Fisher was an associate professor at Boston College, and he developed a model for reflective listening. And there were a whole lot of different models, and they were quite similar. But let's have a look at this one. Starts out by saying focus on the conversation by reducing or eliminating any kind of distraction. So it's like be really present to this situation, particularly if we're talking about something more serious that needs a point of discussion and a point of asking for forgiveness, then let's make sure that we've got some space to really be present to that. Number 2, genuinely embracing the speaker's perspective without necessarily agreeing with it. By engaging in a non-judgmental and empathetic approach, listeners encourage the others to speak freely. So this is really allowing the other person to have a voice in terms of what they're experiencing, and once again recognizing that their experience they have choice over, but it's also about how they saw what was going on. In other words, you get to hear really closely what it was that was going on for them in a particular situation. Number 3, mirroring the mood of the speakers, reflecting the emotional state with words and non-verbal communication. So this is about recognizing what's going on for the person who you're seeking forgiveness. And so it's about not discounting their experience, even though they're responsible for it. So it's not about discounting it. It's being able to reflect and understand that you get what it is that they are experiencing and what's going on for them. And this requires the listener to quiet their mind and focus fully on the mood of the speaker. And so, once again, this is about settling your mind down and not sort of thinking of strategies or devices or mechanisms about how to move forward, but to be truly present to hear and to maybe seek to understand what it is that this person is trying to communicate. The mood will become apparent not just in the words, but in the tone of voice, the posture, and maybe other non-verbal cues of the speaker. So you're taking in the whole person, and that requires total awareness and presence in order for you to be able to do that. If you're off thinking about other stuff, if you're off thinking about strategizing, protecting your own ass, so as to speak, or any of those sorts of things, then you're not really present to hearing this other person and what's true for them in this moment. The listener will look for congruence between words and moods. So you're trying to sort of see what the full package is in terms of what this person is bringing in terms of how they've responded to what you've done or who you've been that's caused consternation or has caused an issue. Then being able to summarise what the speaker said using the speaker's own words rather than merely paraphrasing words and phrases, thereby mirroring the essential concept of the speaker. So it's about being able to, without just using only their words and mimicking, this is about being able to use your words in an attempt to really reflect and show that you've understood what they've said. And of course, to do that, you have to have really listened. Responding to the speaker's specific point without digressing to other subjects. So once again, that's about avoiding distractions. Repeating the procedure for each subject. So each time there's something raised, particularly if it's a complex situation, you might be repeating this on several different topics as it relates to the particular incident. And during the reflective listening approach, both embrace the technique of thoughtful silence rather than to engage in idle chatter. So this is about just shutting up. It's about just stopping and really hearing. Stop trying to lighten the situation with idle chatter. It's about being truly quiet and still and really listening and then being able to communicate. There's a little bit in that, but once again, I think it's a really important part of being able to be truly present in a situation where you're asking for forgiveness. Number 5 is about, I'll just read what it says here. Reflect on how your behaviour in this instance was your call for help, since your behaviour very obviously wasn't an act of love. So where you've moved to judgment or criticism, that's not a loving behaviour. That's a projecting behaviour, and oftentimes it's about, well, what was going on for you? And what we do know about when we go into those places, oftentimes when we're judgmental and critical of somebody else, it's an attempt to avoid our own hurt or poor self-esteem that we're experiencing. And so at the Centre for Western Mindfulness, we often see a lot of that stuff is focused around the narrative, the childhood narrative or the story that you have around your own self-worth. And one of the things that we say to our clients is, in this sort of situation, what did my story have to do with the way in which I was relating to this person in this moment? What did I own in this? And what is it that I can see about this that I could, first of all, understand for myself and share with this other person in terms of helping them to understand what was going on for me in this moment? This isn't about making an excuse. This is about gathering more understanding and appreciation of what was going on. Number 6, consider any help that you might need. So it may be that you need to go and speak to somebody in order to rectify this situation. It may be that there's work that you could be doing that would help you to be better prepared to deal with the same sort of situation moving forward. And of course, can you imagine how grateful somebody who's been hurt by your behaviour would be if they knew that this was an option for you, if they knew that you were prepared to see somebody to get some help around this particular situation? Number 7, make sure that there's relevancy in how you ask for forgiveness. It would be inappropriate to say, oops, my bad, if you've been caught having an affair. So how you communicate, or what you communicate in asking forgiveness, has to have some relevancy. And the other part of relevancy is communicating in a way that has relevancy for the person that you're speaking to. Understand, take some time to reflect on the personality type of this person and the things that are important to them. What we know, for example, from the Enneagram is that they've got these 9 personality types, and they all have different things that they see as being valuable and important. And what would be a trigger for somebody would be water off a duck's back for somebody else. And so it's about really, and this is part of that reflective listening, it's about really being able to hear who this person is, and in the process of asking for forgiveness, really making sure that there's relevancy in what it is that you're saying to the individual, so that they begin to fully appreciate that you get who they are. And of course, that's just an extension, further extension of reflective listening. And of course, number 8 says, what can you do to remedy the situation? Are the things that you need to do to help recompense the person or persons that were impacted by your non-loving behaviours? So in other words, is there something that you might have to do that is compensation for what it is that happened as a result of your behaviour? The extension of that is that part of your compensation is about putting more effort into catching the person doing things right or in a more serving way. So instead of becoming focused on being judgmental and critical, which is about catching them doing things wrong, part of your commitment could be to, in terms of helping to remedy the situation, is being much more committed to catching these people doing things right and speaking and acknowledging those things. And I think that would be a lovely remedy to this situation. Now, there's an added part to this, and that's catching yourself doing things right. It's kind of interesting that oftentimes, as we said before, a lot of our judgments of others come out of our own pain, come out of our own suffering. And that's because we're dwelling on our failings and dwelling on the things that we're struggling with. What if you were catching yourself doing it right more often than you were doing it wrong, or feeling that you were incapable of rising to the occasion? What if you're able to catch yourself doing it right? You can imagine that would minimise your need and the amount of time that you would spend judging and criticising other people. Look, they're pretty straightforward, those 8 steps, but they're important in terms of being able to really make a difference in the process of asking for forgiveness. So in closing, I just want to share some thoughts with you. So much of what I learnt about this level of forgiveness came as a result of my study of A Course in Miracles and attitudinal healing with Jerry Jampolsky back in the late 80s. And I want to share with you some statements that come from that work that I did all those years ago that have led to me having the appreciation of forgiveness that I have now. And I'd like these to be my closing comments as we come to the end of this series on forgiveness. The first one states, all forgiveness is a gift to yourself. So this is based on this whole idea that when you have the capacity to forgive another, it allows you to move into a place of peace, and therein is the gift for you. When we don't forgive and when we carry grudges and we hold on to that stuff, we destroy our peace and there's no gift to us. We actually cause more stress for ourselves. So this becomes a really important gift. The next one. You who want peace can find it only by complete forgiveness. And so in this series of blogs that we've done on forgiveness, I've been talking about all of the complete dimensions of forgiveness. And ultimately, if peace is your priority, then you might need to go back and listen to these videos and read these blogs on several occasions in order to fully appreciate complete forgiveness as a way of life. It is sure that those who hold grievances will suffer guilt, as it is certain that those who forgive will find peace. So in other words, if you hold grievances, it's going to end up, and as the Course in Miracles suggests, it's going to end up with guilt. About the fact that you've continued to hold this stuff, and it's going to have guilt, and it's going to have anger, and it's going to have resentment, and a whole lot of other things that are going to continue to fester. Whereas it's certain that those who forgive will find peace. This is a very interesting one, and is substantial in terms of the spiritual journey. The way to God is through forgiveness here. There is no other way. And so when we look at the formula for returning to God, which was in the Beatitudes, the last few Beatitudes really state what this is. And the third last, or the fourth one, says, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. This is this whole notion of giving and receiving are the same, but mercy is forgiveness. Blessed are the pure in heart, and that is about extending love to people. So in other words, the state of your heart is what drives how you relate to the world. It's very hard to relate with love if you haven't been able to sustain forgiveness. And then eventually, blessed are the peacemakers. To be able to create peace requires forgiveness. It's a fundamental principle. And so this statement, the way to God is through forgiveness here, there is no other way. It's fundamental in what was being taught as the noble path towards enlightenment from a Christian perspective. It's fundamental in that spiritual journey. And in the written blog, I finish with this statement. When you meet anyone, remember it's a holy encounter. It's an interesting thing. If each time you meet somebody, you think of it as a holy encounter, what you want to do is bless them, as opposed to move to that place of judging them. As you see him, you will see yourself. As you treat him, you will treat yourself. As you think of him, you will think of yourself. Never forget this, for in him you will find yourself or lose yourself. On that note, my friends, thank you for following this blog series on forgiveness. I hope this has been helpful, and I look forward to commencing and delivering a whole new blog series in 2023.